All right, so get ready because we're about to unpack a story that really takes us into like the dark side of human nature, you know? We're diving into the Wondery podcast, The Depraved Heart Murder.
Oh,
This case is all about Sarah Harris. She was a young woman with like all these big dreams. And then there's this Dr. James Ryan.
okay.
He was an oral surgeon.
Right.
And he comes into her life under, well,
Which just,
kind of unusual circumstances, you could say.
it sounds like one of those stories that just makes you question everything you see, you know? Like, are things really what they seem?
Exactly. And that's what we're going to get into
Yeah.
because the mystery at the heart of this is Sarah's death. Was it, just a tragic overdose or
Was there something more going on?
right, like was there something more sinister,
Mm.
something intentional? And we're going to look at all the crazy twists and turns of the investigation,
Yeah.
including this really unusual charge
Interesting.
of depraved heart murder.
You don't hear that one every day?
No, not at all. It's a charge that really gets at a whole different kind of criminal intent.
Absolutely.
So to start, let's just like try and picture Sarah Harris.
Okay, yeah.
She was a beauty queen.
Wow.
She spoke multiple languages,
Wow. Impressive.
and she really wanted to become a doctor herself.
So it sounds like she had a really bright future ahead of her.
Yeah, she really did.
But then,
But then things took a really unexpected turn when she met Dr. James Ryan.
oh,
And this is where it gets kind of strange.
Okay.
He was her oral surgeon.
oh, wow.
And get this, he was more than twice her age.
That's a big age gap.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
And he was already in a relationship when they started dating.
Oh, so that definitely complicates things.
Yeah, it raises all sorts of questions about the relationship for sure.
Right.
Like what was going on there.
Right, right.
And Sarah's mother, Tina, she noticed some red flags right away.
Like what?
Well, Ryan, he was like showering Sarah with all these extravagant gifts, like a diamond necklace, for example. Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he even admitted that he had been, like, quote unquote, observing Sarah since she was a teenager.
Okay, now that is unsettling.
Right.
It's like, that's not normal behavior.
No, it's not.
It makes you think, like, was this just a romantic interest or was there something like more obsessive going on?
It's chilling to think about.
Yeah, it is.
And sadly, that's just like the beginning.
Oh, no.
Because after Sarah moved in with Ryan, her life it took a really, really dark turn.
Okay.
She started losing a lot of weight.
Hmm.
She was really struggling with anxiety, depression,
Oh, wow.
and eventually she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder.
This is a big turning point in the story, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Because it's like her whole well-being is shifting.
It is.
And I think it's really important to think about how vulnerable she might have been at this time.
You're right.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, like, how much of that was pre-existing and how much was influenced by this relationship.
Exactly.
And then it gets even darker. Oh, geez.
Because Tina, Sarah's mother, and Rachel, her sister,
Mhm.
they went to visit Sarah at Ryan's house.
Okay.
And they were just like completely shocked by what they found.
What was it?
Sarah was just like disheveled.
Mm.
She was surrounded by drug paraphernalia,
Oh, no.
and she had visible needle marks.
Oh, my God.
I mean, it was just devastating for them to see.
Yeah, I can't even imagine.
And it just raised all these questions like, what was Ryan's role in all of this?
Right. What was happening in that house?
And during that visit, there was this confrontation between Tina and Ryan where he admitted to giving Sarah drugs,
He did?
but he tried to justify it by saying he was just helping her.
Oh, so classic.
Right, like minimizing the harm.
Yeah, it's like a classic tactic, right?
Now,
I
see-
see it all the time.
Shifting blame, controlling the narrative.
Exactly. Trying to avoid any accountability.
It is just, it's awful.
Yeah.
And as if things couldn't get worse, Sarah's brother tragically passed away during this time.
Oh,
So you can imagine, like, the grief and the instability that added to Sarah's already fragile state.
yeah. I mean, loss can be just incredibly destabilizing.
Absolutely.
And especially in a situation like this, it just makes you wonder, like, how much more vulnerable that made her to Ryan's manipulation
For sure, for sure.
and to his control.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is.
So when Sarah died,
Mm.
suspicion fell on Dr. Ryan immediately.
Okay.
I mean, Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Henry Peterson, he was already wary of Ryan.
Yeah.
And then Sarah's sister, Rachel, she was just determined to uncover the truth.
Wow. Good for her.
I mean, she was not going to let this go.
So what did she do?
Well, she actually cracked the password on Sarah's laptop.
Wow.
And she found all these like disturbing text messages and photos
Oh, wow.
that really pointed to Ryan's involvement in Sarah's
Oh,
decline.
so she found evidence.
Yeah, she did. I mean, talk about a sister who would not give up.
Right. That's amazing.
And she compiled all this evidence
Mhm.
into this binder. Okay.
And she took it straight to the police.
Wow.
It's amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So her efforts caught the attention of this detective, Ian Iavello.
Okay.
He was a veteran investigator with a background in, like, pharmaceutical cases.
Okay.
And he was immediately drawn into this case.
He must have seen something in those texts. You know, something that maybe the first responders missed.
Yeah, absolutely. His expertise in pharmaceuticals, it gave him a totally different perspective.
Right. A different lens to view the evidence through.
Exactly.
So what was it about the evidence that stood out to him?
Well, for one thing, the medical paraphernalia at the scene,
Yeah.
it suggested a much more, like, deliberate and controlled, administration of drugs.
Oh, so not just a typical overdose situation.
Right, exactly.
So what was in those text messages? Like, what did they say?
Oh, the content was chilling.
Yeah.
In the early messages, Ryan was offering Sarah these quick fixes
For what?
for her anxiety
Oh, wow.
through injection.
Oh, through injection. Yeah, and what's really significant about this is that
Okay.
it established this pattern of like dependence
Right.
and control.
Because he was positioning himself as, like, the solution
Yes.
to her problems.
While at the same time introducing her to these really powerful and potentially addictive substances.
Yeah, that's a dangerous combination.
Yeah, it is.
So did it escalate from there?
It did. It really did.
Oh, jeez.
The messages show Sarah becoming more and more reliant on Ryan for different drugs.
Like what kinds of drugs?
Ketamine,
Okay.
propofol.
Wow.
There's even a text where Ryan admits to injecting Sarah with ketamine while she was asleep.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and what's so disturbing about that is
A
that it
tri-
shows a total disregard for her consent
Yeah.
and for her well-being.
It's just like it's a violation.
It is.
And it really highlights that power imbalance in their relationship. The fact that he was a doctor.
Right.
And that he was willing to, like, exploit that position.
Yes, exactly.
It's just, it's scary.
It is. It is.
So were there any messages from, like, the night before Sarah's death?
Yeah, there were. They exchanged messages where Ryan agreed to bring her more ketamine.
Wow.
So, I mean, you take this pattern of manipulation
Yeah,
and control
yeah.
combined with, like, the circumstances surrounding Sarah's death.
Yeah.
And it's what led to this unusual charge of depraved heart murder against Dr. Ryan.
Okay, so explain that to me. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, so it implies that Ryan may not have intentionally set out to kill Sarah,
Okay.
but his actions were so reckless
Okay,
and
so-
showed such a callous disregard for her life that they were, like, basically the same as murder.
Wow. So it's like a level of culpability that goes beyond just, like, simple negligence.
Exactly. It's a really complex legal concept.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And it really gets at, like, the heart of this case.
Okay, so now I'm really curious to hear more about, like, the trial itself.
Yeah, we're going to get into that next time. We'll talk about the arguments on both sides.
Yeah.
And, of course, the verdict.
This case is really a deep dive, isn't it?
It really is.
Into, like, the darkest parts of human nature. It's showing how, like, manipulation and exploitation can happen even in places that we think are safe, like the medical profession.
Exactly.
It's a lot to think about.
It is. It is.
So I'm really looking forward to part 2.
Yeah, me too. We'll continue to unravel this whole story of the depraved heart murder.
Awesome. Can't wait.
So make sure you join us for that.
Will do.
It'll be a good one.
Awesome.
All right. The trial in this case, it was really like a battle of narratives, wasn't it?
Yeah, you had Sarah's family. They're fighting for justice. And then you have Ryan's defense team.
Right.
They're trying to protect him,
Right.
trying to minimize what he did.
And what's so interesting is how they both used the same evidence,
Oh, yeah.
especially those text messages, to tell completely different stories.
Right. That's the thing about interpretation. You can take the same piece of information and spin it
Mm-hmm.
in so many different ways.
Yeah. And in the end, it was up to the jury to
Yeah.
decide, who was more believable.
Right. Which version of the story made more sense?
Exactly. So the prosecution, they really zeroed in on how the text messages showed this pattern
Mm-hmm.
of Ryan controlling Sarah.
Right. Manipulating her.
They kept pointing to the fact that he was giving her these powerful drugs,
Yeah.
even injecting her while she was asleep.
It's just, it's scary to think about
It is.
that someone would have that much power over another person.
And they argued that the way the scene was staged, where Sarah was found,
Yeah.
it all pointed to Ryan trying to cover up what he did.
Right. Make it look like a suicide.
Exactly. Like he was trying to escape responsibility.
Yeah.
But then the defense team, they had a whole different take on those texts.
What was it?
They claimed the messages showed that Ryan actually cared about Sarah.
Oh, come on.
I know, right?
That's a stretch.
But they were arguing that he was just trying to help her with her,
Mental health struggles.
Yeah, and they were saying that Sarah was ultimately responsible for her own choices.
Wow, so they're really trying to shift the blame here.
They even brought in witnesses who talked about Sarah's past, like her history with drugs, or her struggles with depression.
They're really trying to paint this picture of her as like a troubled young woman who was, destined for this tragic end.
Right, like it was inevitable.
As if it had nothing to do with Ryan.
Exactly.
But what about the prosecution? Did they challenge that?
Oh, yeah, they pushed back hard.
Okay, good.
They argued that even if Sarah had her own struggles, Ryan was a doctor.
Yeah.
He had a duty to protect her.
Not enable her addiction.
Exactly. They kept emphasizing that power imbalance, that doctor-patient relationship.
And how Ryan took advantage of that.
Absolutely. They said he used his power to control Sarah.
And keep her dependent on him.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
About those boundaries.
Yeah.
Where does caring for someone cross the line?
Exactly. When does it become reckless?
And in the end, the jury had to decide. Was it depraved heart murder?
Right. And after all the arguments, all the testimony,
there's a verdict.
They found Dr. James Ryan guilty.
What?
On all counts.
Wow.
Depraved heart murder and all his drug charges, too.
That must have been a huge relief for Sarah's family.
Oh, you could feel it in the courtroom?
Yeah.
Everyone was just like relieved.
Like a weight had been lifted.
Yeah. And then came the sentencing.
Okay.
The judge gave Ryan 45 years.
Wow. 45 years.
It was a strong message.
To other doctors?
To anyone in a position of power.
That if you abuse that power, you're going to face serious consequences.
Exactly. It showed just how seriously the court took this crime.
And it wasn't just about the verdict and the sentence.
No.
This case sparked a much bigger conversation.
It did, about addiction, mental health,
the opioid crisis,
holding people accountable for overdose deaths.
Yeah, like how do you prove intent in these cases?
Especially when the victim might have had their own issues.
Right, it's complicated.
It really pushed the legal system to think differently about these things.
Yeah, to look at the nuances.
But in all of this, it's important to remember Sarah.
Right, the human cost.
Her family, her loved ones.
They're the ones left to pick up the pieces.
Sarah's ex-boyfriend, Henry.
Yeah.
He talked about all the regrets he had.
Yeah.
And Sarah's mother, Tina, she gave this powerful statement about how she wanted Sarah to be remembered.
Oh, wow. What did she say?
She wanted people to remember her for her vibrancy, her intelligence, her dream.
Not just for how she died.
Exactly. She wanted Sarah to be remembered as a light.
It's a good reminder that behind all the headlines, the court cases, the legal battles, there are real people.
Absolutely.
Whose lives have been shattered.
It's a reminder to be kind, to have empathy.
To be understanding.
Because you never know what someone else is going through.
This case, it really takes you deep, doesn't it?
It does.
Into the dark side of what people are capable of. It makes you question trust.
Yeah.
Power.
Especially in those relationships where one person has more power than the other.
And it shows how even in places like the medical profession, where we expect people to be ethical.
To do the right thing.
That's not always the case.
And we're not done yet. There's still more to explore.
Oh, there is.
Yeah, in our final part,
okay,
we're going to look at the bigger picture, what this case might tell us about trust, power, and accountability in our own lives.
I'm really interested to hear that.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one, so don't miss it.
I won't.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? About, the trust we put in people.
Yeah, especially, doctors, right? You think, oh, they've got all this training.
You just assume they have your best interests in mind.
And then a case like this comes along.
Yeah.
And it breaks that trust.
It does.
It makes you wonder how often something like this happens.
Right, how many other cases are out there.
Where things aren't what they seem.
And what's even more disturbing is that Ryan was so well respected, in his community.
It's like that saying, right? The devil you know.
It's scary to think about.
It is.
This case also brings up those uncomfortable questions about power.
Yeah. For sure.
How it can be manipulated.
Especially in relationships, right?
Yeah, where someone might be more vulnerable.
Like with Sarah and Ryan, that age difference.
That's hard to
It
ignore.
makes you wonder, like, did that play a role?
Did it give Ryan a sense of control over her?
You know, make her more susceptible to his manipulation.
It's a reminder that we all need to be aware of those power dynamics
Yeah.
in our own lives and our own relationship.
And set those boundaries.
Be vigilant about it.
Yeah, no matter who the other person is.
And we have to talk about the warning signs, too.
Of what?
Of abuse.
Yeah.
Especially with prescription drugs.
Like becoming dependent on someone who can give you those drugs.
It's a really dangerous situation.
This case also kind of pushed the boundaries, didn't it?
Legally,
Yeah, like holding people accountable for overdose deaths
it's not easy,
to prove intent.
especially when the victim maybe had their own issues.
Right, like a history of drug use.
This case really made the legal system, like, rethink things.
Yeah, like look at the bigger picture.
Consider those nuances of manipulation, control, and how they all factor into someone's choices.
One thing that really stood out to me
Yeah.
was Sarah's family,
Oh, absolutely.
especially Rachel, her sister.
She was incredible.
So determined to find the truth.
And she never gave up.
It's inspiring.
It really shows you the power of, like, love.
Yeah.
And that commitment to justice.
Even when they're facing so much grief.
It's amazing what they did.
They really helped bring this case to light.
Sometimes it's the people closest to the victim who really understand what happened.
And who can help the police.
They have that unique perspective.
This case is really about so much, isn't it?
It is. It's about the fragility of life.
Yeah.
The importance of holding people accountable.
And the strength of the human spirit.
It stays with you.
Yeah.
Makes you think.
I think it's a call to action for all of us.
What do you mean?
To be more aware
Yeah.
of the potential for abuse.
In our own lives.
Yeah, and in the lives of those around us.
To pay attention to those red flags.
Speak up.
When something doesn't feel right.
Exactly.
We have to look out for each other.
And we have to be there for those who are struggling.
With addiction.
With mental health.
It can make all the difference.
Yeah, just listening.
Offering support.
Letting them know they're not alone.
We can't ignore the dark side of humanity.
No, but we can be prepared.
Being informed.
Protect ourselves and the people we care about.
This deep dive has been, well...
intense.
Yeah, definitely intense.
But it's been so important.
We've learned so much.
About ourselves.
About the world.
About the systems we live in.
It's been a challenge, but...
worth it.
Absolutely, and hopefully it's given you a lot to think about, too.
And maybe even inspired you to take action.
If you want to learn more, you can check out the full podcast series.
Yeah, they go into even more detail.
Knowledge is power, right.
Absolutely.
The more we understand these complex issues, the better we can navigate the world.
And help others.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive with us.
Thanks for listening.
And we'll see you next time.